Hey guys, David Vose here. I'm out at the post office getting complying with the rules of the world today. You've got to have a physical address so the government can keep track of your something. I don't know. So I'm down here trying to establish a mailbox on the end of the road and get my physical address. But I got here at 1 o'clock and didn't realize, I guess they went on break at this post office for between 1 and 2. So anyway, I'm waiting. I got an hour to kill, and I thought I'd come on here and just talk to you guys about something that I think is important. I was just thinking about it, and as I usually do, I just turn these things on when I want to talk and whatever comes to mind. So what I had been thinking about just before I turned this on was, as I've been driving over here, is it started with the words that were rumbling in my mind and thoughts probably about how I felt and how good I felt mentally and how many miracles were happening. I don't want to talk today about all of the miracles and things that are happening in my life, but I'm having miracles on a daily basis for some time now, but they're getting very amazing, almost like I'm living in another world now. Oh, and by the way, I'm just now looking up the road and I see those yellow flowers that I've seen pictures of around here. They're already coming. Oh, they're beautiful. Anyway, I was thinking about my thoughts, and of course, I know that I haven't always had happy thoughts all the time, and I don't have happy thoughts all the time now either, but I definitely have an improvement in my well-being. For it's been growing for some years, but it's really getting to be an amazing thing. And I'm always observing my thoughts, my surroundings, and growing stronger in the faith side, you know? We'll just leave it there. But I also wonder, like everybody else, I guess, at times, the thought will come into your mind about pain and suffering, and you say, well, why is it that you can be really depressed about something? Some terrible thing is happening, or even if it might just be that you're bored, or you have some anxiety about something that's happening in the future. And it might not be an important thing. Like, I'm not saying you're going to lose your house or a marriage or a relationship, but just you've got to go to the post office and do some business, and it brings you anxiety. A lot of people say, well, I'm just paranoid all the time. I can't go out. I can't do anything. I just feel it's a disease. It's a disorder. Yeah, it is a disorder. And many people have it. But it's the mind in some particular place now, if you were to give that mind certain drug, like a little marijuana, many times it will lift their spirits. It does. It works for me. Marijuana is a good thing. I heard people that say, oh, I can't smoke weed because it makes me paranoid or it makes me anxious or something. You see, the weed doesn't make you paranoid. It doesn't make you anxious or nervous or anything like that. Most people that say that have only done it once or twice and they didn't like their experience. But the truth is that it doesn't make you think things. No drug makes you think things. You're the one who decides to do the thinking, and you're the one who decides to be happy. You're the one who decides to be unhappy based on things in your life. That weed cannot change what's going on in your life. And if you've been starved from the spiritual food. Yes, we have physical food, which is proteins and things that we eat, grains and stuff, and fruits and vegetables or whatever people eat, beans, nuts. That is food, and if you don't eat it, your body will die. There's other things that are available to human beings that aren't for food. People wouldn't eat a tall weed called cannabis for nutrition. It might work for rope or weaving canvas tents or saddles, or it can be made into all, it can be useful for so many things. But the herb itself, the bud especially, I guess, when heated to a certain temperature, releases certain cannabinoids and THC and so forth that your body has receptors for. They're called cannabinoid receptors. You also have opioid receptors, because what, Dave? Are you crazy? I'm not talking about heroin. I'm not talking about some chemical contraption, some drug. I'm talking about herbs, the natural plant. Just like sugar, it comes in plants. It comes in beans and nuts and lots of things, but it's very small amount in natural foods. But the body does need sugar, and sugar is a kind of a drug too. I mean, it will change your mood. So it's a drug. Everything is a drug in the sense that every substance that you experience through any of the senses, whether it be your eyes, your nose, your mouth, or your skin, through touching, through your mind, knowledge, we're taking on energy. The highest form of energy is mind. So you can talk to people, and it takes some energy to move your mouth or do the sign language or however you communicate. But the mind takes no energy at all. It is energy. And everything you do in the physical is getting its energy from the mind, which just means the command to do anything. Everything that's done is done by using the energy that is in mind. Now, how could mind have energy? Mind is the being. It's all that is, and it has no space and time. But it acts upon space and time. It acts within it. It dwells in it like a body. So everything that you touch, sometimes we think that certain herbs are drugs and other herbs are just food. But food is energy, and herbs are energy. The food gives a lower vibration, a molecular structure that is larger, heavier, and more material. And it's needed to keep the material form. If you stop eating physical food, your physical body will die. You cannot continue as a physical being without eating. Now, you also have other energies, like, for instance, love, emotion, feeling. So if you do not feel love, you will eventually die emotionally, and it will start turning off switches, and your physical body will eventually die too. So the physical body needs, in real time, the food, because it'll die without food within a few weeks. It'll die without water within a few days. It'll die without air within a couple of 3 minutes. But the emotional being can live without love, without touching, without experiencing, and which is a receiving of the energy. Because when you put food in your mouth, you're absorbing you're making contact with something. taking of that substance and becoming one with yourself. It is feeding you. It's energy, but it's material. So the emotional is important too. If you don't have emotional touching and feeling and love and communication in a good way, you will emotionally die. It takes longer, but you can feel it right away. It's painful. You can handle the emotional pain for some weeks at a time. You don't die right away, but it begins to disrupt down the line, into the lower and weightier, more material aspects. It affects it all, but it takes longer. So we're not aware so much about our emotions. When our emotions get all tangled and frightened and scared and nervous and anxious, well, it's just that we're believing in a bunch of lies. Because remember, the flesh has to understand that it will never die as long as the emotional is being taken care of. And above that, we're going to go to the higher realms where we have the mental. We also have to understand. We have to have knowledge and wisdom. We have to have faith. We have to have all of these things. So we then cannot live with only physical food and or emotional or love. We also have to have knowledge. Knowledge is something that is the absolute foundation upon which everything else lives. And the foundation of knowledge is knowing, which is the being itself. So when we exist, we must eat, we must consume energy. There is no flow of energy without both poles being connected, and the positive energy must be flowing outward and pulling negative energy as a source. And so you've got to be grounded. So when you go into this world without knowledge, you begin to lose friends and acquaintances and happiness. You get emotionally sick, and then you get physically sick and you die. It's all connected. But in this world, we're only aware of the physical. We're not aware much, certainly aware only slightly of the emotional. We talk about our needs. Or, I'm dying inside. So we know a little bit about this. But we don't take it seriously. We think that, well, people should be fine as long as they're eating right. As long as you eat a healthy diet, you know? And we can talk about what that healthy diet is. But I want you to understand that the way you feel and the way you think, those are two other different things. The way you, not just the way you physically, the stamina in your health, but the way you feel. Yes, it's a mental illness and an emotional illness that we can have. It is just like a physical illness, but it is nothing to do with chemicals. There's no cure from chemicals. The body, simply to be healthy, the physical part, just needs to eat a balanced diet. If you ate poisons, that could kill you. But what if you went all the way to the top, which can, within a very short time, kill the body? What if you took and you started destroying the energy that your mind fed on? You got false knowledge. You began to think that you were not all there is, that you were not the source. And what if you then began to feel subconsciously inferior, or, somehow not worthy, or angry, lots of things like this, jealous, those kinds of things, which cause you to not have any touching. Have you ever noticed that, I've got little puppies here, and they're only, just came out of the womb. First thing mother does is lick them. And you might think, oh my goodness, how, that's filthy. I mean, these, there's blood all over them, and it's really disgusting. But you see, the dogs don't seem to worry about any of that. They don't see things as dirty. They don't think in that terms. They don't have that kind of shit. They literally take care of business. And the way that nature, that their true self functions, is that they literally go over when they see something It needs to be done. They just do it. They don't have any shame or guilt. And their bodies are naturally designed to lick and to, they don't have hands. They use their mouths to pick things up. They have to clean themselves with their mouth. Now, when we see an animal and we look at them, they're licking, and we can see physically that they're licking to clean, and we stop to think about how opposite that is with humans. When we're told that humans should never put anything in their mouth or lick anything, because if it's not washed clean with Pine Sol or something, if you didn't disinfect it or whatever, like, you're going to die. Well, that's just absolutely not true. If you were to keep something sterile, it eventually will die. It's like this whole argument that people were using a while back with the mask. Like, well, you won't get any germs if you wear the mask. But you see, then that makes it like you're just sterile. What do you think these thingies are? The principle, anyway, was supposed to be that you take and you get a little bit of the supposed infection. The body learns how to overcome it, becomes stronger, and you're immune to it then. And then we have in our body an immune system. And the immune system does work that way, but it does it in a natural way that is perfect. So we're supposed to come in contact with the normal things of nature. So if the dog was designed to lick each other, why do you suppose that in every nation on the face of the earth, except for maybe the Eskimo, because it's so cold up there they couldn't even take their coat off, to bear any skin. They'd freeze to death, I guess. So they rub noses. But in just about every culture, and think about the French, and the Romance, and the Italiano, and the strong, sexual content, the strong sexualness, the sexuality that they are very proud of. We get this idea of French kissing and things like this. Well, why is this a thing? Do you think somehow or another that there is a conspiracy, that they somehow convinced human beings that this evil perversion of licking somebody in the mouth, this kissing, is a good thing when it's really evil? See, we've got to split personalities. In private, people do all kinds of things. They don't feel ashamed at all. It doesn't even register in our minds or our psyches if we've done anything wrong. It almost seems absolutely natural. Like the animals, we in private, we're actually like the animals. And friends, understand, we are not animals. We have relationships, and we have loyalties and different. With humans, our children take 18, 20 years to grow up, not just a couple of months like the dogs. So we have long lifetime relationships and things like this. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that the world that we're living in, we're in a fear factor. We're in a prison of the mind, and we're being given arbitrary laws. How is it that thou shalt not kill, but if your neighbor does something to you you don't like, go murder them, every man, woman, and child? This doesn't make any sense. How is the law any morality when the first 3 commandments is, I am deity and there is none else, and if you don't get down and worship me, I'll kill you, right? And then the 4th commandment is slavery. You must be a slave for 6 days, right? So people talk about, wait a minute, I like the Sabbath. Hey, the Sabbath is every day for Christians. We're resting. We're at peace. We're not under the curse ever. So we don't have to take a day off because we're always off. We entered into his rest. But the law of the Sabbath is not about the 7th day. That's the day that was the end. That's the end. And now we're in the beginning. And the end and the beginning is just one eternal round. But it's people who live in time and space in this physical world. And are cut off from the spiritual, and they don't understand. See, they've gotten a divorce, which is not something we should have ever done, which means they got married. You got to get divorced in order to be married, right? Because if you somehow or another got to make a ceremony that says we're going to be one, then you got to admit that you never were one. You're trying to become one. Well, why admit that? Why not just say I and you are one. All of us are one in some way or another. We're one as a family because of the sanctity of marriage, which was only marriage that was ever valid was the one there before the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 1, where the Elohim said, this is man, male and female. He made them, and they were one, right? It was Yahweh that cut them in half and then, made a law that says they got to get back together and harmonize things, but they couldn't because now they were cursed because they got cut in half. They were separated, their psyche. So there is food for the mind. And if you do not have the right energy, which we've said is energy. So in the astral realm, we need love. We need communication. We need touching. In the physical world, there is a lot of literal sex. Some say that that's what happened when they partook of the knowledge of good and evil in the middle of the garden being the man himself. And they were seduced, right? And this coming together in the physical way was fine, but because they got so into it, they divorced themselves from the higher spiritual. There's no way that could have ever been done, except that somebody laid a command upon them and said, thou shalt not do that. Then they had this false idea of sin, which caused something to be on their heart that shouldn't have been in there, which was shame. Jesus came to take away the shame, to make the woman whole, because she was 12 years with a flow of blood, meaning the curse. And she was cursed to become a slave and to be obedient to her husband. Because she was going through the maze, she is the conscious mind. And the conscious mind did not have contact with the spiritual higher self. So if you live in the physical world and you only just eat right, but you have no love, you'll eventually wither away and die. And even if you have love and you eat well, but you have no knowledge, you have no understanding, no wisdom, no kindness, no giving, no charitable empathy, no compassion, then you're nothing. And that will destroy your emotions. Because you see, if you don't have the foundation, which is the center, we go from the top down. This world that we're living in goes from the bottom up. They start with a firm foundation. Well, that's good in symbolic ways to explain things, but in reality, the physical is present because of the source, which is invisible. So the real foundation is the spirit. And it's more important that we receive the right energies from our world that would be spiritual, that could feed the mind, or emotional, that would feed our emotions, than would be the physical food to feed the body. You can eat garbage and lose physical energy, and you could even come down with a cold, but you'll recover and you'll be fine, because the physical body is visible. We can figure out what we need and start eating a good diet, and we can heal. But if you're not even aware that you need emotional energy and you need spiritual energy, and you never receive any, or certainly you don't get enough, then you're dying. You don't even know you're missing it. You're like, well, buck it up. Just be, happy even if you're not happy. And go ahead and eat right. That's important, right? Spend a lot of extra money buying organic and just spend a lot of time eating right. Well, that can be helpful to the spirit too, because what you're doing is you're proving that the reason that the material world falls into place is because you have to have a good spiritual energy source, because you couldn't even refrain from eating junk food or doing drugs or anything that's addictive, because the addiction, that's why they call it addiction, It's a control over you. So the less you can, the less material, carnal stuff that you can consume, the less control it has over you. And it requires a lot of abstinence. So in other words, fasting, which is really kind of seems like a negative thing to the flesh, right? You're not eating. The body needs to eat. This isn't right. But your mind needs to be in control, not the flesh. So you need to say, now hold on here. Yes, I know you need food, but you need direction down there. You need me to decide what to put into the mouth and to think about, oh, that's poison, that's not poison. And so you say, well, yeah, it's not the mind that makes me sick. It's physical things, poisons, and that's what's making me sick. But you couldn't be deceived if you had knowledge. And therefore, if you weren't deceived, you'd be putting the right things in your body. So you see, it goes all the way back to the spirit. You don't really even have to worry about the outside of the cup, Jesus said. Why? Because that'll take care of itself. But seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, then all these other things will be added unto you. Don't you know that your Father knows you need all these things before you even ask? So we shouldn't even worry about the physical. It's like some mystery. What do I eat? What do I put on? What do we wear? That's what the nations worry about. Okay, so you don't have to make a law and then start getting anxious about, well, let's see, the law says I can't eat that, and I can't touch that, and I can't do this, and I can't. Now you're all frustrated. You don't know why you're doing anything. It's just somebody wrote some laws down, and you've got to follow it. Now you're a slave. That's the old law covenant, right? You have no control. You're not the Lord of this. You're a slave. But the slave, of course, is going to do whatever he's told. The master is going to give that cattle a lot of fattening, not because he loves the cattle, because he's fattening them up to butcher them. So you see, the cow doesn't have a very powerful spiritual side. It's more animalistic, and he tends to be controlled by the mind. But if there's nobody running the show, if Adam has fallen, then all the animals go into chaos. And they get taken over by the thief who comes in and starts fattening them up to, for the slaughter, who deceives them. He wants them to be his slave. So he makes these arbitrary laws, but they wouldn't have no effect upon you. They wouldn't have any effect upon you if you yourself were in the seat, in the throne, on the throne, over the dominion of yourself. And this is why the fruit of the Spirit includes goodness and kindness to others and self-control. We need to control the self, sit upon the throne and have the dominion over what? Paradise. Because Adam was given dominion. It says he was given a command. Yahweh commanded, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But Elohim commanded before. It was the first commandment. You remember? There's always two. There's two covenants. Abraham, had Melchizedek make him a promise, and then all of a sudden he got duped and started following the lower side. It came along and said, look, give me your firstborn son. Wait a minute. The law that came 430 years later did not make void the promise. We're still only under the promise. So we're not under the law of Yahweh that says, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that you might become like deity. Because we were already made in the form of deity. Not in the image of, but the form. And we were already the sons of Elohim. Jesus said, ye are the Elohim. So we need to go by that commandment that Lord gave us, which is to have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the animals and over everything. Have dominion over the earth. Jesus even said, I give you authority over the serpents. Why the serpents? Scorpions and serpents, Because you see, in that garden, there were all these animals that were being brought to Adam to see what he would name them. Well, those animals were inferior to Adam. He was their ruler. He should have reigned over them, and he should have had an ecological arrangement where he was guiding feeding them like the shepherd, the good shepherd. But instead, he ended up getting deceived because he got split in two by the lower psyche, by the lower ego. So the man and the woman became separate. And then he literally, his other half, the conscious mind, got fooled by the lower nature, the serpent. Well, you see, when Jesus came to the earth, he actually partook of flesh and blood, as did his brethren. So he had to literally come into in material world controlled by these animal natures. Therefore, he had a body. The body was the carnal, and I'm not talking about physical, because we're going to always have a physical being. You know, the creation in Genesis 1 has a physical aspect, not carnal, not lustful, not of the lower nature, but of the higher I am, the bodies of light. But the serpent is the physical body and these natures. Now, the Lord made the natures. The Lord's not, Yahweh's not the one that made lambs and lions and leopards and all these things and serpents. They were all things that our Heavenly Father made. But when our Heavenly Father made all these animals, they had a different nature, right? They're called living creatures or immortal beings. That's what creature means, being. And living means immortal, see? Because it's alive. Immortal means to be alive and never die. So Adam became a living soul, an immortal soul, because of the breath that was breathed into him from Yahweh, because even though Yahweh didn't know it, he was made by Sophia, from a divine being. He was just blind. And so Jesus then was a being, the Christ, right? That was the logos, the expression of the Father, the mind, the logo, Egyptian thought, thoth. But when the thought or the being lowers itself and puts itself under the authority of the lower animals, then you've got disharmony. And these other natures don't have direction. They get wild. And their brute force can cause chaos and havoc. This is why humans come along, we make a bit and we put it in its mouth and we ride that donkey into Jerusalem, into the city of peace. And we say, I have conquered the world. I've overcome the world. So the serpent then that our Heavenly Father made, the divine family, our divine mother, and all of us, the immortal, only begotten Son, which is all of us, we're all in Christ from the founding of the world. We were the Elohim that said, let us make man for our form. And then we entered into this temple, this body, and that immortal being provided that physical outer body of light, the image from that pure source of truth. But the lower ego is simply this. It's the I am, just like the higher I am. The only difference is that the being goes down beneath the lower forces and becomes subject to them. He becomes a slave rather than the heir. If you look at the serpent, imagine it being a coil in the form of the DNA. You can also translate that like a pollywog, a little worm. Sometimes it's the fish. Sometimes it's actually considered a fish. But it's that little pollywog or that little serpent that is the very beginning, that is the start of all life, that within it has all the plans and all the potential and all the DNA that will eventually manifest. But the being, the higher being, is in infinite love and in reality and the creation that was eternal. But that being, because it was connected to the lower, in a marriage arrangement. They were in union, they were communicating. And the physical was led by her divine husband in a relationship where each of them respected and honored in love and walked together holding hands, rather than the man dragging her by her hair. And she had her power. That flow of blood, you see, was the curse that Yahweh put upon her. But Jesus removed the curse. The woman regained her power. He said to the woman at the well, I would have given you eternal rivers of life bubbling up from your innermost beings if you had just asked me. But because she was deceived, who is she? The conscious mind that's now been separated from the spiritual mind. Once that separation took place, because Yahweh split Adim, plural, in half and made the male and the female, the man and the woman, and cursed the woman to be a slave and forbade her to have knowledge. Well, in a sense, the conscious mind must have knowledge. You can't, it's like telling a dog not to lick its foot. That's what a dog does, right? And the conscious mind is trying to become aware. It's trying to learn. But the commandment, don't learn, literally became a curse. Don't be free, but be in bondage. Simply because the conscious mind needs to be wed and one with higher mind. And when that unity, that wedding takes place, the veil is opened, there's that orgasm of love, you have the divine child. You have the flow. You have the replenishing and the rebirth and the motion which sets the adventure into play. So Jesus came to come into the body which had now been cursed. And Yahweh said, because Yahweh's the I am vengeance, I am stupid, I am the lower, unaware ego. Unaware because I haven't learned yet. I haven't advanced. So I am in this darkness. I am in this ignorance. And he says, I am, and there is none else. You must not believe in anything but what you know, what you can see. But what Yahweh did by putting the shame in the temple, which is defiling this holy woman. That's why the word harlot has the connotation of a woman without a husband. There's no marriage. She's just having relations with a lower nature, the beast. Now, that's the lower nature of this elemental world of form. And the deity of that realm is the I am that dwells there. And because he's there and he's jealous and he's ignorant, he curses the woman and he curses the serpent. But what does he tell the serpent? He says, when I curse you, you're going to go on your belly. So how is it that he didn't go on his belly before? Because he had wings. All the animals were different. He changed their nature by means of the curse. And the curse came because he made a commandment that we believed, because he's a liar and a murderer from the beginning. And we were deceived and we became his slaves. We're bound under the law, under the ignorance. When Jesus came, he said, all you have to do is believe. And he redeemed us so that we are no longer bound by the ignorance, but now we can become one with the divine mind again, the Christ in us. So that serpent wasn't bad. It simply had been cursed, just like the woman. She's not bad. I know the Judeans wanted to stone her. They said, you're bad. Why? For being who you are. Well, the man's not guilty. He divorced you. Now you ain't got a husband. Now you ain't got no way to provide for your food, and you're missing part of yourself. So you are in a state of delusion, and you will die. There has to be a reconciliation, a restoration of all things spoken of by the mouth of all the holy prophets and apostles. So Jesus did not enter into, when Jesus crucified the serpent, he didn't cease being the I am, living in a lower nature. The creation was still good, but he had to remove the curse. So he had to put the wings back on. So when Yahweh, by his law, condemned the serpent, Jesus, being the higher consciousness, simply raised his being out of that mess through faith and trusting in his heavenly Father, who is able to save, and his divine mother. And by rising the level of consciousness up into the upper room, the foundations of the place in which they stood was shaken to the ground. And they saw tongues cloven in twain upon their heads, meaning that these two energies were now one, the twin flame. And their higher chakra was open, and they received the inspiration from Mother Sophia, the wisdom. And it was from the top down, and then they changed. They had the power, the dunamos, to demonstrate the holy power of the divine. And it literally, its power makes it have dominion. It reigns. That's why it's powerful. And by that union or that wedding, because it happened on Pentecost, which is the same time that Moses gave them the law of Moses, and they were wed to Yahweh. But now they're being redeemed, and the wedding comes on Pentecost, which is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, which is the orgasm of the union of lifting the veil and going into the inner chamber with the Lord and having the union, the unification, the reconciliation, which is simply love from freedom, from trusting your inner creation, which is the reality. So Jesus then died, and the serpent that didn't have wings, the one that went on its belly, the Bible mentions a viper, which will bite you, and that's the carnal flesh, which was the carnal vipers that were eating the children of Israel, biting them. So Moses lifted up a serpent, and that is the lower serpent that's wound around that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the experience of this life. But if you simply experience that crucifixion, that curse, and die, because that which is made alive is not first made alive until first it dies. If you don't go through the experience or the awakening that Mother Eve initiated us all through, which is to gain knowledge that we might become like the divine being, then we will never become like the divine being. But what we're really doing is becoming aware and receiving the gnosis. And Jesus said, this means eternal life. This is what it means. This is what it is. Taking in knowledge of you. Who? The only true deity, the divine being. Through knowledge, we attain knowing that we are of the divine nature. And that itself then awakens our consciousness and raises it. And now the serpent comes up out of the grave and ascends. You cannot ascend without wings. You cannot fly without wings. So now your body is still going to look like you in every detail, all right, except it has wings. It's a glorious, beautiful, feathered serpent or winged serpent. That's then what Jesus meant when he says, I am the morning star. In the Garden of Eden, Seth had 6 kids. The 7th in line from Adam was Enoch. That is in the Sumerian Enki. However, Cain's firstborn child was also Enoch or Enki, and they both built cities. The city that the good Enoch built is the city that's going to come down from heaven, which is the advancement of the intelligent mind of love. It's the organization. It's comprised of spiritual stones being built up as a spiritual house for the Lord to inhabit by spirit. The other Enoch built this world and the structure, and that's the archons. In our Bible, we call them patriarchs. Yeah, they're the chief fathers, right? The ones who are the chiefs, the arcs. Now, the other side, the astrological, occult, dark side of Satan, he also has archons and principalities and powers and dominions, but he sets up his throne in your body. Well, he occupies the throne of your body. He takes your higher consciousness and separates it from the lower consciousness, and he makes you believe that the identity that he wants you to believe that you are through this deception, the delusion, he wants you to believe that's the true identity. Many people get so obsessed with anxiety and depression and hate, jealousy, they actually begin to believe they are sick. They don't want to be well. They're proud of it. They're proud of being a sinner. Well, they are only going to be that way for a short while, because you put your hand in the fire and it hurts, and you will pull it out eventually, very, very soon, actually. So there's no reason to be worried. Everything is as it should be. We're going to learn by the things in which we suffer. But that serpent that was on the cross is the body of the Lord Jesus Christ. It is that body that we're all in, many members. And we all, he being the firstborn among many brethren, we all came and died on this cross. He showed us the way to the Father. He did not purposefully sin. We're not saying that. This is how the occult and the devil will lie to the people, saying, look, it's all part of the plan. We should just go ahead and be evil, that good may come. This is what they say, according to what Paul says. But you see, Peter says they are twisting Paul's words. And many people today are twisting the esoteric wisdom to say that, well, if Jesus then literally came in the form of a serpent, well, yeah, but he did not let that serpent body rule over him. He knows, and he told everyone, I am. And I'm going to manifest the glorious body that I should be, the immortal one. See that a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I do. I do have flesh and bones, no blood. I don't have the life of the carnal self. I now have been exalted to a superior position above the angels. Now, there's another point we were talking about the other day, that angels have white robes, therefore they're glorified. Therefore, they've already been through a test and they've attained. The Lord has been showing me lately, because we were talking also that Anu, who is the father of the deities, is really Noah. Well, wait a minute. Then what about Adam? I mean, who's Adam? Well, that's another world. In fact, in that world, those patriarchs or those archons or those chief beings were in another world, the world that then was. And that world went through its existence and was judged. Yeah, the divine beings were judged, and some of them were thrown into Tartarus. But the ones who were not thrown into Tartarus at that judgment, they were exalted and given white robes. Because I do believe that the people of this world still haven't gone through the judgment. The angels are simply people that have already existed in another age, in another time, and have already gone through their judgment. We started the whole world over again with the world that is now, that's being reserved unto fire. And so I believe that the flood happened would have been about 14,000 years ago. And that would have initiated this time of the bottom of the wheel that we've been going through. Now we're about to go on the top of the wheel, and we're going to go for about another 12,000 years, advancing in our Heavenly Father, Uranus, in the light of heaven, the top side of Theos, or the day, the divine, and the children of light, and the advancement of the city of the true Enoch, which built his city on a mountain, which is the summer solstice. And we're all going to that great city. But before we get there to see the Father and the Divine Mother, we're going to wed our wife again and reconcile the family. So the reason I said all that is because I want you to understand that life on this earth is a physical nature. But what we have to do is get control over the physical nature. We don't want to make it evil. It's not evil. We need to understand that in order to be happy, it isn't just eating physically a good diet. It might be also, and primarily, start with the very foundation of everything, and that is your mind. You must believe that I am the resurrection. I am well. I am happy. You are the I am. You must know that you have control. And by your word, you will command that mountain. And the mountain, which is your belief system, if it is not in harmony with heaven, in other words, it's not getting the proper rain or the dew or the sunlight. And by the way, I've learned something about tomatoes. A lot of people have trouble raising tomatoes. I have my whole life. I found out one of the most important things. When you water your tomatoes, you must make sure that you soak the edges around the pot, not just the center. Because if you're pouring water, it goes right through the soil and it only wets part of the root system. Then there's a outer part of the root system that doesn't get moisture. And then this is why you start seeing the outer leaves around on your tomatoes starting to dry up and they turn brown. You're like, why is it, what is it? Some mold, or why do these tomato plants have so much trouble, keeping them alive without all these little brown spots? Because you've got to moisten the soil around the peripheral of the root system. Anyway, back to what we were saying. So the mountain is going to be the soil in which the trees are going to grow and the animals will go under the branches. It's an ecological system. And on top of all of that, right, the wolf has den and the bird has nest, and it's all the natural order of things in the mountain. And they work in harmony. Those are your beliefs. Those are your thoughts. The vegetation is like ideas that come and go, and then you make them into bread and you feed on the ideas. They can make you healthy. But if it's poison, they can, watch out for the Lebanon Pharisees. They can kill you. And the birds in the branches of the trees is the heavenly angels that's looking down and blessing all this arrangement and the dew from heaven, because you're following and your source is our divine Father and Mother in the heavenly realms. So the mountain, on top of it, the very top, there's a city. And the city is built not by nature, but by man himself. That is the part where the advancement, you're taking the soil and somehow smelting the iron and the gold and making crystal and glass and jewels and the arrangement of things. The taking of the trees and the beams off the branches and building the edifices and smelting the rock. And all of this is an advancement that man brings to the equation, because we must advance now that we've advanced to our fullest extent physically, stand up right, and we got our wings. And now that the flesh, this mortality, has been redeemed because we've got communication with our spiritual self, the wedding has occurred. Now we go into the city and we build our empire. We build our government. And the laws that we're going to make for society to live is going to be made by the 144,000 the spiritual stones that make up the city. And so it's very important that we understand that while we're on the earth, we need then truth foremost. We need love also. And we need to understand that there are certain portals in our body for knowledge. Since as your eyes receive the sunlight, if you didn't have your eyes, you'd be blind. Okay, and you can be spiritually blind. If you didn't have your ears, if you were deaf, you wouldn't be able to understand. You wouldn't be able to comprehend without your eyes or understand without your ears. So at the same time, there are other energies other than the lower vegetable kingdom that we must consume. As spiritual beings, and most importantly, as spiritual beings, because that's what we are, we need the energies that are very refined, emotional and mental, which is the truth and the good news and the knowing that we are the I am. And we slide our understanding to a higher place in the upper room, and we rise the body that was in the grave and buried and went to hell, which is reincarnation over and over again, the endless cycle of rebirth. Jesus went down there and conquered it like Orion on the horizon, came up out of the Duat, out of Sheol, and he reigns in the top side of the wheel. And that then is the Quetzalcoatl who flies up into the air and says unto the people as he goes off into the east, I am coming again as you see me leave. Just as Jesus told the people in Judea. Jesus himself went to every nation and told them all that he would come. He had other sheep which were not of this fold. And so they knew that over here in Mexico City, they knew Jesus in ancient times before the flood, as in the legends that we read about, as Thoth. But in our age, they knew him as Quetzalcoatl, because when Jesus died, he died for everybody. And he taught their priests and their people too, because he had other sheep. And he went and he preached to all of them on the circuit of Galilee. All the nations, India, Persia, Africa, everywhere, they all had these mysteries. There's so much confusion about what that serpent is. The serpent is the flesh. It is not evil. There is no evil in the universe. It is simply the curse that was put upon the flesh that Jesus took away. He took the curse away from the serpent and the woman. And now there is no slavery, and there is no slander, because he's answered the slander and he's overcome. And he's sat upon the throne and he's ousted the devil. So one of the things that you need to understand is that there are things in nature that are the outlets for these energies that you require living in this world. We've been duped and we don't have this knowledge anymore. It's been taken from us, the knowledge of the herbs. There are a lot of people, I started talking about cannabis. There are a lot of people that think, well, I can't do the cannabis. It makes me nervous and I don't like it. You need to understand that if you're already anxious and there's something in your life that is bothering you, you don't have understanding where you need to have understanding, you don't have a feeling of security, you don't have the endurance that you need, or the self-control, or the courage to shine bright and give and give and give. You're not this powerful being that has the mind of Christ. Then the outer parts of the cup, it doesn't matter, because you have the inner part of your mind. Your mind is clean. But if you're going to have a clean mind, you still need to feed your emotional body. You are internal, infinite. You are the source of the energy. But everything down the line that we manifest is manifest from you, the will, the I am. So if you're not in the I am of the advanced, of the knowing, but you're deceived and you're down here, then you're manifesting something wrong in your body. And you're probably not in your physical body. Those portals aren't opening, and you're not getting any nourishment to your emotional being. and you're not getting any mental frequencies of peace and love. So one of the ways we're supposed to do that is by eating food. We're talking about sugar. Sugar is a drug. It affects the way you are, but it makes your body really tired. After you get a bunch of energy, then you get really tired. So obviously that's a chemical. That's not a real herb, because herbs don't make you tired or sick. But it does tell you that everything affects you. Negative energy affects you, makes you tired, but negative energy can be a big boost for a minute, like pleasure, but then it weakens you. So sugar is bad because it's a chemical, and it does more damage than it does good. It doesn't give you energy. They say you get energy from sugar, but you're burning it fast. You're really being used up and burned up. You need to have oil-based food that can feed all of the tissues of the body that are fatty tissues that things to be replaced, omega-3, omega-9, omega-6, and so forth. We do need some kinds of sugar, but certain kinds of sugar that, that have to do with things like riboflavin, which is vitamin B. Well, it ferments. It's like a fiber that sits in your stomach, and it ferments into some of the B vitamins and stuff, and this gives you energy and power. Well, so if you were to eat the wrong physical substance, if you just took a plant and you extracted all the sugar and left the fiber out and left all the vitamins and things out, and you just ate the sugar, like soda pop and candy and all this stuff, then that can be a detriment to your ability to think properly. You start getting anxious, and it's like it doesn't relax you. Just like some foods make your body tense. If certain things are extracted from the herb, and you're not eating the whole plant the way the Lord intended, it can make you paranoid, or it can, drain you of energy rather than give you energy. It might give you the ability to work physically hard for a while. That's why a lot of rich people do cocaine. They don't always do it just for the pleasure. Sometimes they do it because they can think. That cocaine gives them this strong ability to think and put together things and go fast and get a lot done and make more money. But what they don't realize is then they work for several days and they crash. They usually burn out at 40, right? They literally, and then become mentally ill. So that's damaging, because it's all energy in the wrong way. It's lust energy. Now, when you eat the herbs, and this is why I'm telling you, because I think we need on a regular basis, every day, to partake of certain herbs. There are different kinds. Yes, we need the proper amount of sugar and the right kind of sugar that we find in nuts and berries and original grains. There's a little bit in there, but there's no gluten, and it's a certain kind of sugar, and it's part of the whole food with the fiber and all that. So you can't just take the chemical and extract it. Now it's a chemical, and it doesn't work naturally. It's not absorbed in the body. Body can't process it, and you'll get sick. But what we've been told is that here's some food. We're not going to tell you what diet is. For hundreds of thousands of years, people didn't know. They were eating biscuits and pancakes along the wagon trail, right? And whiskey and tobacco, and this is what mankind has eaten for centuries, this white flour, white sugar, big bags. And the only thing they had was even healthy was dry beans, right? Maybe the venison that they shot that day on the trip. But everything else was poison. They ate tobacco and drank whiskey and gin and all of this. So it's been an effort to never let anybody know that all of this is poison. People didn't even know why they were sick. But today, people are learning about physical health. But we're not learning that the herbs must be a part of our life, because you need to feed your mind. You need a higher state of consciousness. And the herbs can do that. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Just wanted to let you know that if you have tried herbs and you didn't like the experience, it may be because you're already in a state that is in flux or chaos, and you need to work on yourself. Now, sometimes taking the herb, you'll get used to it and you'll start to relax, and it'll open your mind up to a place where you can find solutions to your other problems. And you'll get through the paranoia and the anxiety. but you're probably starving for these higher frequencies, that you're not used to them. But they will, over time, they will heal you. People talk a lot about the nutrients in marijuana and how it's the CBD oil or this or that that makes you well. No, it is all in the mind. When something takes you to a higher place, you're going to be healthier all the way down through all the layers, all the way down to the most base, and that's going to restore paradise in your body. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful day. May the Lord bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.